Third session of pre-season testing ahead of the new Formula One season will be underway in less than an hour in Barcelona. Our reporter Rachel Brooks is at the Circuit de Catalunya. Very good morning to you, Rachel. With 17 days to go to the Australian Grand Prix, will we get a better idea this week of how the grid will line up in Melbourne?
Well, Alex, we should get a better idea. We won't get the definitive idea, I'm afraid. Teams will still hold a few things back until they actually get onto the track in Albert Park in Melbourne and for that first race of the season. I've spoken to a few of the teams and there's a general consensus that this has been one of the most difficult and confusing pre-season winter tests that there's been for quite a while in terms of trying to work out just who is doing what, really. We've had Fernando Alonso talking down Ferrari's chances. We've had Lewis Hamilton talking up McLaren's chances. And Sebastian Vettel's talked up McLaren's chances as well. Now, this is the final chance for the teams to get those cars out on the track. They've got just over 2 weeks now until that first race. Lotus, I'm pleased to say, are back. You might be able to see their trucks just behind me. They had those problems, of course, in the first Barcelona test when after 9 laps they had such serious problems with the chassis that they had to send it back to their Enstone factory. Well, they're back now and they think they've resolved those problems and they'll be looking to get a lot of kilometres under their belt. They want to do proper race distance runs here. That's what the other teams managed in the first Barcelona test. So Lotus will be looking to do that today with their drivers Romain Grosjean and Kimi Raikkonen. Of course, Kimi is one of 6 Formula World champions on the grid this year. Fernando Alonso, Sebastian Vettel and Michael Schumacher being the others, as well as Lewis Hamilton and Jenson Button. And those two, of course, both drive in the same team for McLaren. We spoke to their managing director last night and asked them how difficult is it when you have 2 former world champions, 2 drivers who could win the title, they are contenders, in the same team. How do you keep them both happy?
Well, none of them are both happy unless they're at the front and going past Red Bulls, Ferraris and Mercedes. They are supremely competitive, both of them. They've both had a good winter to be away and get themselves fit and focused for this year. They've had good time in the car and it's going well for them. And I think we just try and be open and even with them. We have set our policy out to have 2 number 1 drivers, so we're bringing packages for both of them. You know, they set the car up quite differently, but they've got access to all the same thinking, the same engineers, and of course we share the data with that counter that we have in the middle of our garage. So we try and be transparent and honest. They're pretty demanding of us, though. If they're not happy, they'll certainly let us know pretty quickly.
Well, Jonathan was talking to us at the FOTA, the Formula One Teams Association Fans Forum last night. Now, they hold these during the year. They're in the week before a Grand Prix race, and it's a chance for the fans to come along and quiz the bosses of the teams, the drivers themselves. And at the event last night, we had 4 of the drivers there. Vitaly Petrov, who just joined Caterham, he was there on the panel last night, as was Pastor Maldonado from Williams, who are just beside me here, and answering questions from the fans. They get a chance to grill the drivers, and they also get a chance to grill the team bosses as well. And Jonathan Neal explained to us what it's like when they sit on that panel.
I don't know about put the other bosses on the spot. We might enjoy watching each other squirm under the difficult questions, but I think it's a chance for us to give a bit of insight, a chance to open up a bit and answer some of the questions that are on their terms. You know, with the greatest will in the world, the Formula One press ask us the same kind of questions. You see a much broader range of questions and interests, and from some much younger people. no insult intended there, but it's a real cross section of society and interest. You know, there are questions there about the environment and about Vodafone, McLaren, Mercedes being a carbon neutral team. Questions there about our drivers. You know, how do we keep them motivated and happy? Are we going to win this year? You know, so it's a full mix. You have to be on your mettle here.
Well, I mentioned some of the top teams for you at the top when I first spoke to you here. Middle of the pack, we're looking this week at Mercedes, who seem to have quite a quick car that was launched in Barcelona last week. Also looking at Force India, who've been going really well. Williams, who are beside me, they've put the miles in, they've put the kilometres in on the track now. They'll be looking to get some speed out of this week. It's going to be very, very interesting to see what happens. And will we finally see the 2012 car from the HRT team, which we've yet to see? They're hoping to get it out on the track this week, and the cars that are able to will be on this track beside me. You might be able to hear some of them starting up in just less than 15 minutes' time.
Great stuff. Thank you very much, Rachel. Well, a reminder, To Formula One now, and it's the third and final week of pre-season testing in Barcelona. Ahead of the new season, which gets underway in just over 2 weeks' time. McLaren finished second in the Constructors' Championship last year, and Managing Director Jonathan Neal believes they can go one better this season.
We have set our policy out to have two number one drivers, so we're bringing packages for both of them. You know, they set the car up quite differently, but they've got access to all the same thinking, the same engineers, and of course we share the data with that counter that we have in the middle of our garage. So we try and be transparent and honest. They're pretty demanding of us, though. If they're not happy, they'll certainly let us know pretty quickly. There were only 3 drivers that won multiple races last year, 2 of which were ours. Became second in the Constructors' Championships. We won races, both drivers won races, and good ones. So not the year perhaps that we wanted, certainly not the way we started. But we fought hard as a team with everybody, and I'm really pleased with the outcome of that. This year I think we start in better shape, certainly. It's there for the taking. If we work hard enough and pull together as a team, we should be aiming to win this championship.
Well, Neal was one of the panellists at a fans' forum in Barcelona last night. He said it was good for the fans to get to the heart of the sport.
I don't know about put the other bosses on the spot. We might enjoy watching each other squirm under the difficult questions, but I think it's a chance for us to give a bit of insight, a chance to open up a bit and answer some of the questions that are on their terms. You know, with the greatest will in the world, the Formula One press ask us the same kind of questions. You see a much broader range of questions and interests, and from some much younger people. no insult intended there, but it's a real cross-section of society and interest. You know, there are questions there about the environment and about Vodafone, McLaren, Mercedes being a carbon neutral team. Questions there about our drivers. You know, how do we keep them motivated and happy? Are we going to win this year? You know, so it's a full mix. You have to be on your mettle here.
Now, the third session of pre-season testing ahead of the new Formula One season is underway in Barcelona. Our reporter Rachel Brooks is at the Circuit de Catalunya. Very good morning to you, Rachel. What's happened so far this morning?
Well, it's been a very interesting morning. We knew this third test would tell us more about the cars. In Jerez, in the first test, there was a lot of downbeat talk and a downbeat mood around Ferrari, around their car, with Pat Fry saying that he wasn't sure they weren't where they wanted to be right now, and there was a lot of work to do. Felipe Massa saying that he saw a lot of work necessary on the car, and Fernando Alonso saying we only know 20% of what we need to know. Well, Felipe Massa's gone out in that Ferrari this morning, the F2012, and just set the fastest lap of 1 minute 24.828 seconds. And to put that into some sort of context for you, on this day last year at this test, it was the fastest lap was set by Mark Webber in the Red Bull in 1:22.544 seconds. So they're a couple of seconds off at the moment, but the track temperature here is quite low. It's only around 18 degrees. And at the moment, these drivers are finding that the best time for them to do their runs, to find a realistic idea of where they're at, is between sort of 11 a.m. and 3:30 a.m. here. So they'll be heading into that very, very soon, and they'll be able to see just what their cars really can do. Second fastest is Sergio Perez in the Sauber. Now, Kamui Kobayashi in the Sauber last week was the fastest man on the track. So have Sauber got something in their 2012 car that the other teams need to keep an eye out for? We've also seen the Red Bull this morning, and very interestingly, I mentioned earlier on that the teams would bring their upgrades to this test. They'll bring the setups that they're likely to run in Melbourne. They've been keeping a lot back. They've been very cagey, most of the teams. Well, this morning, Red Bull, as soon as that car comes into the pit lane, the cover goes on the exhaust. The cover goes on the rear of the car. No one can see what is going on at the rear of that car. So at the moment, that is a big talking point here. You know, just what are they covering up? What have they developed? What have they added to that car? A lot of other teams are trying to hide things as well. We've seen Mercedes cover the back and the front, in fact, of their car, which they launched here, the W03, here at Barcelona last week. So a lot of intrigue going on, teams still being very cagey. We've seen Jenson Button out in the McLaren. It's the slowest car on the track at the moment. His lap time, just a 1:42 right now, but they're trying all sorts of things, and they've just brought their upgrades to Barcelona. They've been running their launch specification car until now, and at the moment, teams just trying to get some laps under their belt. Not really looking at lap times. What they will do, though, is once we get into this afternoon, after we've had the lunch break, they'll be trying to do race simulations. They'll be running race distances. You can expect around 66 laps from each of the teams here today, as they see just where they are at with their cars for this season. And to give you an idea of what they'll expect by the end of the week, we spoke to the managing director of McLaren, Jonathan Neal, and asked him at the end of this week, you ship the car to Melbourne, what are you hoping to have found out?
I'd like to see some warmer temperatures on the circuit so we know how to get the best out of the tyres. I'd like to get everything that's coming through from working to the circuit here and maintain the reliability, just to give the team a lift so that as we go to Australia there's that continued push, because what's in the pipeline for Australia is largely done now. Now we've got to be looking at race 2, 3, 4, etc. So you're never far away from the next objective here.
Well, just a couple of hours until lunch now here at Barcelona, and we'll let you know later how the teams are going and who's got the latest fastest lap. Back to you.
Back to Formula One now, and the third session of pre-season testing in Barcelona. Our reporter Rachel Brooks is at the Circuit de Catalunya.
Yes, back in the paddock here at the Circuit de Catalunya in Barcelona for the first day of the final winter pre-season testing. And we told you last time that Felipe Massa had just gone fastest. Well, Mark Webber's been out in the RB8 again, and he's posted the fastest lap of the day so far, over 1 minute 23.9. And Jenson Button has taken 5 seconds off his fastest lap from earlier on. He's down to a 1:24.1 right now. But I'm joined by James Allison of Lotus, who is the technical director there and who has had probably the busiest few weeks ever, I would imagine, since the busiest few days at least since last week. And what happened with the chassis, James?
Yeah, we had a very troubled first test here at Barcelona last week. Unfortunately, on our first proper run, braking for first corner here, the suspension pulled away from the chassis to a certain amount, certainly to an amount that we were not able to run the car again with that chassis. It was the second chassis we'd made for the year, having had a trouble-free run with our first chassis in Jerez. But when we looked at the nature of the failure, we concluded with some regret that it would have been irresponsible to run that design again. So we withdrew from the test, and we've been hard at work back at the factory making the modifications to ensure that it's now good and strong and able to run here and for the remainder of the season.
The chassis you had here, the second version, it was a lighter monocoque, wasn't it? And I read that you've added a kilogram to that. Would that be about right? It's had to have a kilogram extra on it?
Yeah, although it wasn't lighter in the area. In fact, it was not really lighter full stop. It was pretty much the same, to be honest. But in order to make the thing strong enough around the area that failed, we added about a kilo, yes.
So how has it been so far this morning? Roman's been out.
Well, we've been trying to catch up with a lot of the stuff we missed by not running in the last test. So we've been doing what are sort of rather unexciting runs of gathering aerodynamic data this morning, stuff we wanted to do last test and are now having to compress into the mornings of this test. So yeah, he's been out, chassis running no problem, but the main program kicks off sort of with the remainder of the day. When you
look at the rest of the day, a lot of teams are going to try and do the race simulations this afternoon when the track temperature's gone up a bit. Are you in a position to be able to do that?
Well, we had as you know, a very reliable first test, a lot of kilometres, in fact the most reliable of all the teams. And so if we want to do a race simulation, we can, but we've got a slightly unusual programme simply because we're trying to jam a lot of things into 4 days, having missed the 4 days previously.
How much of a setback is it? I mean, where do you think you are right now? Can you catch up this week and be ready for Melbourne without any problems?
Well, I think we can. I won't make light of it because losing 4 days is bad news for the drivers, bad news for us. But a lot of the parts that we need to go racing with in Melbourne were not ready in the last test in any case. So, and they are ready now. So we get to do all our running with the appropriate configuration this week.
And you mentioned how well you went in Jerez. Are you pretty confident despite this setback, confident for the season ahead, which is 2 weeks away now?
You'll never get a straight answer out of any team on that, I'm afraid. We did have a good test. We hope we're adequately placed, but we'll find out in Melbourne. But we just want a reliable, good programme in these 4 days to make up for the lost time we had in the last test and to get ready for Melbourne.
Well, I know you're very busy today, so James, thanks very much for taking time out to talk to us today. And we're about an hour, just over an hour away from the lunch break now, and the teams come in, and then we'll see them carrying out those race simulations this afternoon and get a better idea of what these 2012 cars can do.
To Formula One now. The teams are currently involved in testing. We've been to Jerez, we've been to Barcelona. We are back in Barcelona 17 days ahead of the new season. Our reporter Rachel Brooks is at the Circuit de Catalunya. Rachel, we've obviously been focusing a bit on Ferrari, a little bit on Lotus, who struggled in the last test. But who's impressed so far in terms of the timesheets?
Well, David, as you join me now, we're at lunch, which is why it's a little bit quieter around here at the moment. But as you join me, it's McLaren and Jenson Button who's just posted the fastest time of the day so far. Not too many laps, though, for McLaren under their belt as yet today. And I'm joined now by Ted Kravitz from Sky Sports F1 HD. And Ted, what have we learnt from this morning? I mean, Jenson does top that list, but there have been a few this morning.
Yeah, Jenson's only done 27 laps, but I think this is a crucial moment for McLaren. This is the end of the first session of winter testing, of the final test in winter testing, and it's the first time that McLaren have ended one of these sessions quickest of anybody, and I think that will give them a lot of good confidence. They've come here, they've targeted this test from the very beginning. This was always their plan, to come to this test with the package that they're going to go racing with in Australia. So they've put some new bits on the car. Not all those bits are fitting together, I have to say. I was just down in the pit lane and I could hear the dentist drill out, and they were just filing down a bit of the rear bodywork, because sometimes when you get to a new track, you bring new parts, they don't all fit together. So there's been some just adjustments that they've actually had to make to the rear bodywork to make everything fit together, but they seem to be getting it right so far.
What other changes have we seen? We were looking quite closely at the Ferrari a short while ago.
Yes, not a massively quick time from Felipe Massa in the Ferrari. He's well down the order at the moment. That's because they brought a new exhaust layout to that car, and what that means, they hope that there's speed in it. There would be, otherwise they wouldn't bring it to this test. But it means they have to go through all the revalidation techniques and all the checking that they have to do earlier on in the winter all over again with that. So Felipe Massa, on his last run just before lunch, went out with this what we call Aero Flow Vis paint. So it's paint that they put all around the exhaust, and they come back into the garage and they can see where the air is going. It's quite an intricate thing that the aerodynamicists have to do, but it proves to them that the air is going where they want it to in the exhaust area.
And who else has impressed so far? I mean, there's been quite a bit of talk about Mercedes being quick. Have you had a look at them today?
I have, yeah. Nico Rosberg, I'm just checking, 57 laps. So actually Nico Rosberg's done the most laps of anybody so far in this morning's session. He's down in fourth place at the moment. Romain Grosjean, though, 36 laps. That's important for Lotus because they missed the in-between test, the intermediate test, the second test in Barcelona here, because they had a chassis failure. It failed at the front suspension points, and that's a big thing for Lotus. So they'll be very pleased that they've managed to fix that problem, and they've reinforced that area of the chassis, and they've come here, and the car seems to be staying together. Sounds like a basic thing. It wasn't for Lotus. It's very important. That car is not braking on them.
Important that car's not braking, but equally important, two teams aren't running cars today. HRT are hoping to have a car on that track by the end of this test. They have got a car, but it's not here right now. And Marussia failed the 18th of those crash tests, and they're not here at all. Massive setbacks for both.
Yes, it seems that for two of these relatively new teams, actually it's their third year in the sport now, they seem to be worse prepared for the start of this season than they were when they came into Formula One some 3 years ago. Marussia, it looks like, will come to the Australian Grand Prix having had no winter testing. HRT are hoping to get out for one of the last few days, but there's some rumour in the air that despite all the glorious sunshine we have here, the weather is set to turn for Saturday and Sunday, the last 2 days of this test, and that might also mean that HRT go to Australia with no testing at all.
And just finally, this afternoon we are expecting some of the teams to do race simulations, or will they hold back on that until later in the week?
Well, I'm hoping to see more of the McLaren this afternoon. So at the moment, they're just checking that everything works, checking that some of the new parts fit together, and they'll go through these new parts bit by bit. I haven't seen the new front wing they've got here. I haven't seen the new rear wing also. So they will gradually take their time, and they'll put those new parts on the car, go out and test them. So I'm looking forward to seeing if Jenson Button stays at the top of the timesheets by the end of the day.
I do have one final one for you, though. How close are these cars, then, to what we'll see in Melbourne? We were told last night by Jonathan Neal, we're going to add our upgrades, but they're not putting all of their upgrades on, are they?
No, because if you put all your upgrades on at once, then you're not sure which bit works and which bit doesn't. So they'll take it step by step. We'll see some improvements and some upgrades by the end of the day, but I think it's not until Saturday and Sunday, if the weather holds, that we'll see the absolute definitive Melbourne spec on these cars.
Great, thanks very much, Ted, for your time at the moment. Yes, the weather forecast actually for Saturday is pretty much raining all day here, which will disappoint the teams. That not a great time. They don't want to test necessarily in the rain. They know what the wet tyres do. But anyway, this afternoon we have another full session, and there will be teams trying to do race simulations, and we will keep you up to date with everything going on here in Barcelona.
Thanks very much, Rachel. To Formula One now, it's the third and final pre-season test for all the teams and their cars in Barcelona, with the exception of Marussia, who failed their final mandatory crash test, so they are not in action. Nevertheless, 17 days and counting to the new season. Our reporter Rachel Brooks is at the Circuit de Catalunya. Rachel, it's always so difficult, isn't it, with testing to really make sense of what's going on. There's a lot of cloak and dagger secrecy, but in terms of the action you have seen out there on track so far, what can you tell us?
Well, David, it has been an interesting day. I mean, this is the test where the teams bring all their upgrades. This is where they bring the new features, the new innovative features that they're going to put on their cars ahead of Melbourne. They've been hiding things until now. We've seen a few new features here today already, but the team that's out in front right now is McLaren. Now, they've been running their launch specification car up until now, and today we saw the car that will take to the grid in Melbourne, more or less. There'll be a few bits and pieces to be added on, but they are running that car today. Jenson Button is out in it for McLaren today. Lewis Hamilton will get in that car tomorrow as they swap days. But at the moment, Button is fastest out on the track with a lap of 1:23.51. But he's only done 35 laps today, and most of the teams this afternoon are trying race simulations. They're running a race effectively. They're doing the pit stops. They're running 66 odd laps, trying to see just what it is that they need to still do with these cars before the first race in Melbourne, just over 2 weeks, in 2 weeks' time. Teams that have done the most laps: Caterham, Vitaly Petrov is in the Caterham today. Heikki Kovalainen went down ill this morning, so Petrov has taken the seat for today and will probably run tomorrow as well at the moment until we hear further from Caterham. But also Nico Rosberg in the Mercedes has been running today, and the Mercedes have been very, very quick today to cover up the rear wing and the front wing of their car, the W03. We've been in the pit lane trying to have a look at that for you. And we have spoken to Ted earlier on. We're going to be speaking to Martin Brundle later about what it is that Mercedes have on their car today. And elsewhere, it was the Ferrari we saw as well. We saw the Ferrari's new exhaust today that they've brought to this Barcelona test. They're going through a lot of updates here. At the moment, they're doing a lot of aerodynamic work where they're putting the paint on the car and seeing where it flows to when it goes around the track. And because of that, they're slightly behind at the moment. They're not able to do this race simulation just as yet, but Felipe Massa is back out on track and they're continuing with their programme. The sad news, of course, you mentioned Marussia not being here. Well, HRT are here, but their car isn't yet. But we have heard that they're hoping to try and test on Sunday here on the final day of this test, because if they don't, neither team will have tested their cars before they get to Melbourne. First race, 18th of March.
Thanks very much indeed, Rachel.
Now to Formula One, let's take you back to Barcelona for the third session of pre-season testing. Just 17 days now to go until the start of the brand new season. Rachel Brooks is at the Circuit de Catalunya for us. Rachel.
Yes, David, and I can tell you it's still good news from McLaren today, because this is the first day in testing where they've been on top of the lap times. Jenson Button going around in the car today, and I'm joined now by Martin Brundle. And Martin, I say good news for McLaren. How much can they read into it, and how pleased will they be?
They're doing a lot of long runs out there, high fuel loads, and of course different tyres to choose from. So I don't think that the absolute lap times are that important, to be honest. It's the consistency they have, how much tyre degradation, whether the drivers are happy through those longer runs. And you have to say, I've had a couple of hours right beside the racetrack this afternoon, and the McLaren is looking very good.
Who else has impressed you out there? You say you've been keeping an eye on them. I mean, we've looked at Ferrari and they're well down on the times. Massa's 8th fastest today, but they are running some new kit on the car today.
Yes, but 3 days to go in testing. The Ferrari looks a bit of a handful, especially coming out of a corner when it's trying to put the power down. And they are still clearly, instead of doing long runs like McLaren and Red Bull, they're obviously still trying to sort their car. But there's time yet, and of course they could put a lot of pieces on before Melbourne. But it's got all the hallmarks. It doesn't look as bad as the McLaren did at this stage last year, but they've got some issues. There's no doubt about it.
So do you think we'll have the same three at the top? And we haven't mentioned the Red Bull here. You've seen the Red Bull going round today. They haven't been doing as many laps as some of the other teams, though.
Red Bull looks good, like the McLaren, but it's not glued to the track like we saw last year, partly because the regulations have changed, or largely it must be said. But you can see Mark Webber working quite hard at the wheel, so I can understand why some of my mates in the paddock who I would trust to tell me these things are saying it's looking really close, because there's no doubt about it. The Red Bull doesn't look head and shoulders above the other cars as it did, say, in the second half of last year.
If we look at the chasing pack, I mean, everyone's been talking about this Mercedes looking quick. They possibly done something different at the rear. Have you seen on their car?
No, as soon as they come in the pits, they cover them over, and back it straight in and put the covers over, which they're not allowed to do at races. You're not allowed to cover your cars up, but at tests you are. So again, you don't know. I mean, if one team's running 70 kilos of fuel and the other's running 50 kilos of fuel, that's 0.8 of a second already just in the fuel load, which of course we can't see. So I'm not really too concerned about the absolute lap times, as I said, but the Merc looks good. There's no doubt about it. But it hasn't. I think we were wondering if they were going to turn up late with something amazing, say like Braun did in 2009, but I haven't witnessed that out there at the moment, unless they're keeping something up their sleeve. We know that McLaren have got a lot of new parts coming on Friday evening. I know Red Bull have got lots in the system as well, even before Melbourne. So let's see who can pull something else out of the bag. But what looks very interesting to me is the mid-pack, which is Force India, Toro Rosso, the Sauber. They look really good, and they're hustling the cars out there. Great to see.
Getting a lot of laps in, some of the teams. I mean, Mercedes, in fact, have got 102, but it's the Caterham that's done the most laps so far today, looking reliable. They're not that far off those other teams you've just mentioned, are you? It's sort of the top of the midfield.
Yeah, the trouble is in Formula 1, a second is like a different championship, but the Caterham does look... Hear them getting on the power 20-30 metres later than the Red Bull and the McLaren. You just sense it doesn't have the downforce, it just doesn't have the stick and the grip. So they've got some work to do on that. But yeah, at least it's panning around. In fact, you have to say the one thing that stands out this afternoon is that, you know, a lot of the cars, remembering two teams are not here, of course, in HRT and Marussia, but the cars that are here are generally panning around quite heavily.
And what about the Lotus? They obviously had a horrific week last week, and they've come back today and keep sending Roman out on these runs. What have you made of what you've seen so far?
Car looks good. He's hustling it. You can see as soon as the driver's happy with the car, with the balance of the car and the centre of pressure not moving around, so he knows what it's going to do next. They start chasing the throttle pedal and getting out of the corners and shifting up a little bit earlier. And just like the Toro Rosso, must be said, I think the Lotus looks good.
Well, Martin, thanks very much for joining us. We have half an hour left here on day one of this final winter pre-season testing, and as Martin was saying, towards the end of the week, more bits adding to the cars. It's going to get much more interesting here in Barcelona.
Lotus's Romain Grosjean has set the fastest time so far on the first day of the last pre-season test ahead of the new F1 season in Barcelona. It's one of the last chances the teams will get to fine-tune their cars ahead of Melbourne, and a turnaround for Lotus. Their E20 was back on the track after chassis problems forced them to abandon testing last week.
Well, we've been trying to catch up with a lot of the stuff we missed by not running in the last test. So we've been doing what are sort of rather unexciting runs of gathering aerodynamic data this morning, stuff we wanted to do last test and are now having to compress into the mornings of this test. So yeah, he's been out, chassis running no problem, but the main programme kicks off sort of with the remainder of the day.
Well, McLaren have looked consistent and quick so far. Jenson Button in the MP4 27 today. They're the only team who haven't got a step nose on their car.
A crucial moment for McLaren. This is the end of the first session of winter testing, of the final test in winter testing, and it's the first time that McLaren have ended one of these sessions quickest of anybody, and I think that will give them a lot of good confidence. They've come here, they've targeted this test from the very beginning. This was always their plan, to come to this test with the package that they're going to go racing with in Australia.
Well, there is lots of intrigue surrounding Ferrari's car, having struggled in the two previous tests. Felipe Massa behind the wheel today. He's been off the pace though, while Mercedes' Nico Rosberg did the most laps in the morning session and was fourth quickest around the circuit. The Brackley-based team were quick to keep their car under wraps when they got back into the garage.
Well, as soon as they come in the pits, they cover them over and back it straight in and put the covers over, which they're not allowed to do at races. You're not allowed to cover your cars up, but at tests you are. So again, you don't know. I mean, if one team's running 70 kilos of fuel and the other's running 50 kilos of fuel, that's 0.8 of a second already just in the fuel load, which of course we can't see. So I'm not really too concerned about the absolute lap times, as I said. But the Merc looks good. There's no doubt about it. But it hasn't. I think we were wondering if they were going to turn up late with something amazing, say like Braun did in 2009. But I haven't witnessed that out there at the moment, unless they're keeping something up their sleeve.
Well, the backmarkers HRT were hoping to launch their car at this test, but they're not here today. Marussia won't appear in Barcelona at all because their 2012 car failed the last of the mandatory crash tests. it's possible they could head into the opening GP without having tested this year's challenger.
Lotus's Romain Grosjean has set the fastest time on the first day of the final pre-season test ahead of the new F1 season to show that the team are back on track after having to abandon their session last week due to a chassis problem.
Smiling again, Romain Grosjean was happy to be back on the track today in the Lotus E20 after the car's chassis suffered serious problems during the last test at the same circuit. It meant the Lotus only completed 9 laps in Barcelona last week, but Grosjean ended day 1 of the final winter test by topping the lap times.
Unfortunately, last week we had to cancel the test, so we had a lot of work to do today, but I think we have pointed some good areas that we wanted to work on during the day, which is good. And the car is still feeling really good, as it was the case in Jerez, so at the moment quite happy.
How was last week for you?
Well, home. Training at home is not as good as driving an F1 car, but all the team worked really hard and they managed to solve the problem, and we are back stronger, so it's a good point.
The chassis that Lotus sent back to the factory was their second design, and although they missed a third of the available winter testing time, it could have been worse.
We've been trying to catch up with a lot of the stuff we missed by not running in the last test. So we've been doing what are sort of rather unexciting runs of gathering aerodynamic data this morning, stuff we wanted to do last test and are now having to compress into the mornings of this test. So yeah, he's been out, chassis running no problem, but the main program kicks off sort of with the remainder of the day.
With just over 2 weeks to go until the first race of the 2012 season, Lotus admit they're playing catch-up, but they're not alone. Marussia failed their crash test and they're not here in Barcelona. HRT have made it to the circuit to Catalonia, but they haven't got a car to run yet. While Lotus are back and they're confident they'll be up to speed by the time they get to Melbourne.
Losing 4 days is bad news for the drivers, bad news for us. But a lot of the parts that we need to go racing with in Melbourne were not ready in the last test in any case. And they are ready now. So we get to do all our running with the appropriate configuration this week.
We're all working very hard. For sure, more running you have, more ready you will be in Melbourne. But I don't think we'll be ready.
Most of the cars on the track were trying out new upgrades, with the McLaren leading the lap times for most of the day and Ferrari trying out a new exhaust design. But Red Bull had new parts arriving on Friday night. Rachel Brooks, Sky Sports, Barcelona.
Now, with less than 3 weeks to go until the start of the new Formula One season, Romain Grosjean has given the Lotus team a major lift by setting the fastest time on the first day of the final pre-season testing in Barcelona. It's the last chance the teams will get to fine-tune their cars ahead of Melbourne. Lotus's E20 was back on the track after it developed chassis problems, which forced them to abandon testing last week.
Unfortunately, last week we had to cancel the test, so we had a lot of work to do today, but I think we have pointed some good areas that we wanted to work on during the day, which is good. And the car is still feeling really good, as it was the case in Jerez, so at the moment quite happy.
McLaren have looked consistent and quick so far. Button was fastest in the morning session and finished with the second best time of the day.
This is a crucial moment for McLaren. This is the end of the first session of winter testing, of the final test in winter testing, and it's the first time that McLaren have ended one of these sessions quickest of anybody, and I think that will give them a lot of good confidence. They've come here, they've targeted this test from the very beginning. This was always their plan, to come to this test with the package that they're going to go racing with in Australia.
There's lots of intrigue surrounding Ferrari's car, having struggled in the 2 previous tests. Felipe Massa behind the wheel today, but he's been off the pace. Mercedes' Nico Rosberg did the most laps of any driver today and was 5th fastest. The Brackley-based team was quick to keep their car under wraps though, and they got back into the garage.
Well, as soon as they come in the pits, they cover them over and back it straight in and put the covers over, which they're not allowed to do at races. You're not allowed to cover your cars up, but at tests you are. So again, you don't know. I mean, if one team's running 70 kilos of fuel and the other's running 50 kilos of fuel, that's 0.8 of a second already just in the fuel load, which of course we can't see. So I'm not really too concerned about the absolute lap times, as I said. But the Merc looks good. There's no doubt about it. But it hasn't. I think we were wondering if they were going to turn up late with something amazing, say like Braun did in 2009. But I haven't witnessed that out there at the moment, unless they're keeping something up their sleeve.
Webber finished the day just ahead of Rosberg, but half a second off the pace set by Lotus. He'll hand the car over to world champion Sebastian Vettel for tomorrow.